When it comes to truly life-altering revelations that I've had later in life, nothing is going to compare finding out that you're supposed to peel the bananas before you eat them. Close second is what I just learned on guitar, okay? So if you've been following the channel, I've been doing this thing all month where Sweetwater sponsored me to kind of like just take a couple hours a day and practice shredding. So what I've been doing is I've been like relearning the 3 notes to string method, and it's really opened my eyes to a lot of different things. So this is kind of a continuation on a lesson I posted earlier in the week, where it's just really one shape that we like move all over the place, right? But the more I started thinking about it, the more this one shape has kind of put everything into place. I'm excited to talk about this lesson because, like, legit, I've learned so much just from kind of seeing the fretboard from a different perspective that I really want to talk about it, all right? So real quick, the shape that I talked about in the previous lesson just looks like this. It's okay, super easy, all right? Now, if you do 3 notes to string, it's easy because you start pointer finger 5th fret on the B string, you go 2 frets higher, and you go 2 frets higher. And you do the exact same thing down a string. Now, the reason that this shape is so important to me is because of the symmetry of it, right? You can do a lot of different things. You can double stop through it instead of playing them individually. You can kind of double stop, play 2 at a time. You can kind of make a little lip. But aside from that, it's like, you know, you may have seen a shape like that that's symmetrical. Again, starting somewhere, going 2 frets higher, 2 frets higher, and then repeating the same thing. But the interesting thing about that is this shape repeats literally right on top of each other, okay? So I've got the 5th fret of the B string, 7th fret to the 9th fret, 5th fret, 7th fret to the 9th fret, and then if I play the notes in this key, this is the key of A, we're going to talk more about that in a second, I just start the shape again on the 10th fret. Okay, so 5th fret, 10th fret, starting on an E note, and then starting on an A note. So again, A is our root note for the scale, okay? We're going to make this musical by the end of this lesson. Stick with me. I promise you, you're going to learn a lot if you just stick with it through the lesson. We're gonna cover like a lot of theory, a lot of different techniques and stuff. But I really, truly believe that you're never going to see the fretboard the same way again after doing this. Just like you should always peel bananas. It's not so weird when you think of other fruits, right? Like, you don't peel an apple before you eat it. You bite right into it. So don't judge me. Anyway, this pattern repeats itself on any string set. And the reason that this has really changed my entire perspective is because usually I think in different ways of like, okay, I'm learning scale shapes, whether it's the pentatonic, and this sits on top of another shape that goes all throughout the 6 strings of the guitar. But as soon as I started thinking of the guitar, instead of 6 strings across, I started thinking of them as sets of 2 strings. Everything changed. Everything has changed the way I look at this, right? So I want to do this exact same shape, but I'm going to start it on a different E note. I'm going to go to the D string, 2nd fret. Okay, right? So it would stand to reason that we can do the exact same thing on the D string. 2, 4, 6, 2, 4, 6. And then we go to the next fret down, 7, 9, 11. Okay? So, again, these are symmetrical shapes that we can just work our way through. Okay, now just doing that, you're playing all the notes in the key of A major. And I think a lot of people, and a couple comments I got in the last video are like, well, okay, why are we starting with an E even though we're in the key of A? All right? And I think the important thing is to think about how far away the interval, the spacing is between these 2 notes, right? If we just like think of like counting through the musical alphabet, E, F, G, A, they're a 4th apart, okay? The reason that this is so helpful on guitar is because a guitar is an instrument that is tuned to 4ths, all right? So if I look at just like the open E string, the next note down, E, F, G, is an A. If I start on an A, the next string down, A, B, C, D, A to D is a 4th. A D to a G, D, E, F, G, that's a 4th. The thing that always screws people up is the B string, because the B string, G, A, B, is tuned to a 3rd, okay? So you'd have to compensate for the B string in a lot of things, which we'll talk about. But if you just think of it as D to G being a 2-string set where we can do the exact same thing, right? 2, 4, 6, 7, 9, 11. This is just a block of notes. Play it however you want. And then we can do the same thing with, again, that was the D and the G string, the B and the E string. Okay? So instead of memorizing patterns that are 6 strings across, I think it really is going to help a lot of people think musically by thinking of patterns this way, 2 strings across, and then combining them with the next pattern of 2 strings across, right? I think it's a more efficient way to learn the fretboard. It's a more efficient way to start thinking of like root notes and where scales begin and how to jump in to touchstone parts of the fretboard. And it doesn't have the daunting task of having to learn an entire shape, 6 strings across, and where it sits on top of each other. Because again, there really aren't even any different fingerings thinking of this. It's really just kind of going double stopping at a time, the exact same fret. Now again, you can do whatever fingerings you want, you know what I mean? You can kind of like chart it out. Like if I'm seeing, all right, 2, 4, 6, 7, 9, 11. If I'm just thinking of the D and the G strings and I want to play around in the key of A, I can do whatever. I can... Right? And that just sounds like noodling, but I'm still kind of starting a little bit of a muscle memory and seeing how these are connecting me to different shapes. And I think the trick here is in the half steps, all right? We have a note, a whole step, and then that half step connects that same shape. And this is what really tipped me off. This is where I kind of had the revelations, like, okay, well, these half steps are right on top of each other. And then I started thinking, well, if I think of each string as its own idea, almost like how a piano is, right? Like a guitar is really laid out in a linear way, just like a piano is left to right, except each string is its own kind of piano. We have like an E, then an F. An F sharp would be like a black note on a piano, and then you go to G, G sharp, so on and so forth, right? The tricky thing as far as like being able to understand the entire fretboard as a whole, whereas it's easy to understand a piano keyboard as a whole because it's just linear, left to right, is thinking linearly left to right 6 times across when it's offset, okay? So this is where I want to talk about the difference between A's role in the key of A and E's role in the key of A, all right? Now, a lot of times, if you hear the major scale talked about, whether you do 3 notes per string or, I guess, traditional middle pinky, index, middle pinky, index, ring pinky, the intervals are whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. You can do that on a single string, right? Open 2, 4, 5, 7, 9, 11, 12. This would also be a great time to talk about how this video is sponsored by Sweetwater and Walrus audio effects pedals. Everything you hear is going through a Walrus pedal. I love their stuff. I've made a small board. I've got their power supply. Right now, all you're really hearing is just the compressor, the Deep 6 compressor, but we're gonna get a little harder later on with some delay from their D1 stereo reverb, and you're also hearing the R1 stereo reverb, the D1 stereo delay. And then if you've been watching the Patreon videos where I do the exercises and stuff, I usually go through the ACS1 amp simulator because I'm going into PA. I'm bypassing this because I'm using an amp. So we're going to talk more about the Walrus pedals later. But we're talking about intervals in the major scale, all right? So, A major scale is A, whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. And I'm sure you've probably come up against like the modes at some point in your life, right? And it's like, okay, there's the Mixolydian mode, right? So in the key of A, E is the Mixolydian mode. It's major with a flat 7, right? I think thinking of it this way is a much better way to see the difference between modes, okay? Major with a flat 7, all that means is identical across the strings, but the 7th note is 1 back. So if A is open, 2, 4, 5, 7, 9, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1 again. E just has a flat 7, okay? So the only difference is if we start on the E string, we have the E major scale until the 7th note, which we get to the 10th fret, okay? So the only difference here is the 10th fret on the E string and the 11th fret on the A string. So that's why it's like using the guitar's tuning, the guitar being tuned to fourths, is a perfect way to take advantage of there only being one difference between these two modes, all right? That's why combined, we can play them both together. Open, 2, 4, 5, 7, 9. And then that's the difference, okay? What we've been talking to, what I talked about in the previous video, and what I've been kind of talking about in this video so far, is really just kind of doing that one shape, open, 2, 4, and then starting a half step, but not finishing the shape, okay? Thinking about it modally, I don't even want to say modally, right? I just want to be like thinking about these as the exact same scale with one small difference at the very end of the shape. I feel like this is a very easy shape for anybody of any skill level to play, because it's really just, it's essentially the difference of playing an E minor chord, right? The first chord that you ever kind of take a look at that's really easy to play. That's all you have to do, right? Just 2E and 2A. Open E, open A. 2E, 2A. Then start on 5, 7, 9, and then that's where that separation occurs, right there. So all you have to do is find the E on the D string, and we can do the exact same thing. And these notes are going to line up, and they're going to keep you inside an entire key, right? In fact, let's turn on the Walrus delay to kind of get a little fancier, right? So 2nd fret on the D string is an E. So now we start the same pattern. Whole, half, whole, half. Okay? But again, that last spot is where the differentiation happens, right? You've got your whole step, the half step connects them, and then that one where they diverge from a major 7 to a flat 7, and then back home, okay? And I do think that eventually this is really going to help people kind of like put together maybe solos and like lead playing. Another thing that I heard a lot of people say about the last video is that, well, I already spent all this time learning how to do like pentatonic, like A minor pentatonic stuff, right? Well, the beautiful thing is you can combine these. You don't have to think about it as learning a different methodology. You can combine them as the same thing, right? So now let's do the whole thing. Let's talk about everything we just learned, but we'll talk about them in the key of C, or more specifically, A minor, right? If you've ever done any kind of pentatonic stuff, your pinky is going to go on the 8th fret of the high E string. There's your C, okay? And then you can, from here, if you're in C major, you can kind of go backwards. And that's that pentatonic position 1 that everybody knows, right? Well, instead of thinking of this as a completely different method, why don't we just tack on the super easy stuff that we already know about this scale, but it just starts right here, okay? Because there's that C, and then its 5th, the G, is going to be that 8th fret. So the 8th fret now is where this shape starts, and then a half step from there, right? So remember, this is the G on the B string. So we've got 8, 10, 12, 8, 10, 12. A half step higher from where you end is the 13th fret of the B string, which is a C, which you can also play up here. Now, between just that one shape and your minor pentatonic scale, you know everything across these strings, across specifically the B and the E string, and then you can tie that in to anything minor pentatonic that you want to do. You just have to remember where you're going to start, and then you can add that differentiation at the end there. In fact, let's turn on the Walrus Iron Horse. Get a little. So So maybe you start off with like a pentatonic lick, right? And then we take that. Okay, where that came from in my head was just exactly what we talked about, this shape. Even though we talked about running the whole shape and starting it over again, doesn't mean that we have to always play all the notes, right? Maybe I'm just using this shape as a way of like, all right, now I see these boxes where it's 8 and 8 and 10 and 10 and 12 and 12, and I know that I end. The next shape would start here, which is a C. So maybe if I'm playing around in C or A minor. Right, so that's like a real easy way to, right, I'm just doing a little hammer on, H10, and the high string, and then ending on a C, right? You can keep going. And then always get back into the minor pentatonic shape. So it's a super easy extension, even if you want to kind of like roll into it. Like that's something right there where I never would have thought of connecting pentatonic shape 5, which is, you know, like there. I would have thought of that as connecting pentatonic shape number 4 into number 5 into number 1. Right? But instead of thinking about it that way, it's taking one existing shape and then seeing that and then connecting that into stuff that you already know, right? So I don't want people to be daunted like, oh, this is like a whole new methodology of 3 notes per string, because that's not what it's about. I think learning in 3 notes a string kind of really helped tip me off into thinking differently, and that just opened up everything, right? Because again, we can keep it in C. Remember, we start on the 5th. What's the 5th of C? C, D, E, F, G. Anytime you find a G, you can do this exact same thing, right? So 3rd fret on the low E string is a G. So we can do that same shape. 3, 5, 7. 3, 5, 7. Again, that's a reach, right? Lower down here, but you don't have to make it a reach. You can. And then I can actually play the C like we said before. Just a half step up. And there it is. There's my G. 6 notes there. And then there's my C, like that. It's identical. Remember, that 7th is what differentiates it. Or I can actually take the same thing and start on the C here on the A string. Okay? So by having the A minor pentatonic shape, which everybody already knows. If you, I mean, come on, I know that you know that shape, right? It's like, I can arm my knowledge of that and then surround it completely with just that one shape starting on a G or a C, right? Super symmetrical box. Started here. Those are all the notes right there. I can transition that up to here. I can transition right that through the box. I end up on another C here. And I keep going on and on, right? The next G on the A string would be the 10th fret. And that brings me down to here on the C. And I think another thing that really helped me kind of really visualize this and put this together in a way that I'll never forget it and that just made total sense was one of the exercises that I was doing on the Patreon. If you guys haven't seen it, I've been posting kind of like guided practice lessons on the Patreon where I screw up, so you can see me screw up too, just practicing, trying to do my best. And I remember it's like, okay, I want to take all the notes on just the B and the E string, and I want to start by maybe going through 6 notes at a time, 3 notes per string method, and then advancing one section, or like shifting forward one shape at a time. And the funny thing is, it's like I was thinking in different shapes. This is shape 1. 5, 7, 9, 5, 7, 9. Shape 2, 7, 9, 10, 7, 9, 10. Shape 3, 9, 10, 11, or 9, 10, 12. Shape 4, shape 5. But it's like, that's dumb. It's just one shape. We've got the, like that. It's the exact same shape on both strings, but thinking of it in a different way really opened my mind, where I could, instead of being like, okay, shape 1, 2, 3. Right? It's like it's so much easier to think of it as like one thing, because then you can more fluidly transition. Because that's kind of the main goal of like learning guitar and getting good at like lead stuff and unlocking the fretboard. Is it's about playing where you're not playing the shapes. You're using the shapes as markers to play music, right? The shapes are going to help you always make sure you're hitting a note that is in the key, or maybe finding a note that is not the key if that's what you're looking for. And then you kind of just go on from there, right? It's really liberating to finally be able to unlock the fretboard in any way. And I know like a lot of people struggle with it, myself included. I mean, I can't tell you how much time I spent practicing like, all right, A major. Well, that's F sharp minor. And that's B Dorian, right? And then Lydian, right? And it's just, you know, that stuff was definitely not a waste of time by any stretch of the imagination. But I do think that like thinking of the guitar 2 strings at a time, using the fact that in most tunings the guitar is tuned to fourths to your advantage, because it always kind of does those things, is just again the most eye-opening revelation I've had on guitar in a long time, right? So if you do want to practice some stuff like this, definitely go to Sweetwater, get yourself some sick gear. I really want to, real quick, I'm going to go through all of them. I'm going to talk more about this board in like a later video, like vlog style. But here it is with nothing. And again, I love this guitar, the St. Vincent guitar, like. But as soon as you turn the compressor on, sounds great. Then when you put the delay on, oh, I missed it. Turn it on, there you go. Even if it's more subtle, you can go way off the mix. You can turn the mix way up. And then reverb, come on. And then bring the iron horse in, come on. Sounds fantastic, right? So I think it's great to practice these thinking of the E string as maybe your launching point 1, the D string is the next set of 2 strings, and then the B string is the next set of 2 strings, and then combining them, right? Knowing that we're starting on E in the key of A, doing any key you want, but again, in E, like that, right? Or even just like, doing the same thing on the 2nd fret of the D string, or doing the same thing on the B and the E string, right? And then combining that with stuff you already know. If you're in the key of A, F sharp, minor. Pentatonic would be where you'd want to go. And it just makes so much more sense. It frees up your hands into just doing amazing things you never would have thought possible. Just like peeling that banana, every layer of mystery from the fretboard is being unpeeled before your very eyes. So yeah, I just really wanted to kind of share that. Hopefully I did a good enough job explaining it where you can kind of see it as clearly as like I see it now. And then using it musically is like a totally different ballgame. But again, that's not... I almost think that that's not something that you can be taught. I think that's something you got to figure out, because musicality is different for every person. Like I've heard a lot of people kind of badmouth shredding ever since I started this whole like trying to shred in like a month thing. But it's like I don't know. Is shredding a bad thing? It's like one person's artistic expression is whatever, could be something different to somebody else. So, you know, Musically, obviously, you don't want stuff to sound like scales or exercises, but that just comes with like getting the scales and exercises down first, and then using them how you want to use them, right? So again, I'm going to be talking more about this method in the future. Going to be using these Walrus pedals in the future. Thank you again to Sweetwater and Walrus for sponsoring this video and some more of the videos we got coming up. If you have any questions, hit me up in the comment section, Instagram, Twitter, or the website, and I will talk to you all soon. Let me know what you guys think. Thanks a lot.